Hello. Please consider the following. If you started this lineup last week in your fantasy football league, you probably lost. Andrew Luck, Jeremy Hill, Amir Abdullah, Keenan Allen, Eric Decker, Devontae Adams, Austin Sfarian-Jenkins, Cody Parkey, Ravens defense. You probably could fill a lot of other names in there too. If you are 2-0 or 1-1 in your fantasy football league right now, you should consider yourself lucky. Lucky. Because this season has been nothing but a bloodbath, at least for most of us. The injury bug is long again this week. There's a lot of matchups to break down this week. We are going to try to survive. My team, don't even ask. Yes, I'm 0-2. Maybe a lot of you out there are 0-2. If you're a Tony Romo owner, you're hurting. If you're a Matthew Stafford owner today, a Breeze owner, the list is lengthy. We'll go over it. Welcome to the Week 3 preview edition of the Fantasy Football Stock Report for your team, your league, your game. This is your home for fantasy football advice week after week, giving you the best that we can, the best that we can look forward to, considering the mess that, every year it's the same. You draft players to be reliable. You hope that they come through for you. And if either they get hurt or they don't produce, then you're always scrambling to the waiver wire to find the next big thing. And that's where I'm at right now with a frustrating 0-2 start. I'm not used to that. It's something that I'm not really comfortable being in, but all I can do and all we can do if you're one of those owners that's 0-2 is shrug your shoulders, say move on to the next week, and put in good waiver claims, which hopefully you did, and hopefully you got some guys that can work out for you very quickly, address your issues where you needed most depth, and go from there. But the big leadoff story is the injuries. I mean, there were just several last week again. And once again, we start off in Dallas. No bigger injury than Tony Romo. And once again, the left clavicle that he also broke a couple years ago. That we've heard with same thing with Des Bryant. We've heard different time frames on how long Romo's going to be out. We've heard 6 to 8 weeks. We've heard 8 to 10. We've heard the whole season. So if you're a Romo owner, it can be a very difficult situation for you right now to gather. But there are, some quarterbacks on the wire that have, decent matchups in the coming weeks. So if you're, if you're not comfortable keeping Romo on your roster, now he was put on the IR, but I think it's called IR designate, which means they're able to return the season. So he's not ruled out for the year. He is eligible to come back in week 11. But still, you've got to make a decision. Are you going to can you carry Romo on your bench for that long and wait that long, or are you going to go just to be like a streaming quarterback or use two quarterbacks that have decent matchups? Or say if you had a number 2 like Carson Palmer, who's now playing like a number 1, you could still get potentially a guy on waivers that can help you. So it is a tough spot to be in. It is a tough decision if you're faced with that. But there are some quarterbacks out there that are playing like QB2s that have good matchups just for this week or in weeks going forward, the way they're playing. Andy Dalton is a prime example of that, with Cincinnati playing well right now. So I know Colin Kaepernick's available in a lot of leagues. Even Marcus Mariota, who I got off waivers and I'm using this week in my matchup because Drew Brees is one of those quarterbacks that might not play this week with his shoulder issue. So there are options out there, so just keep that in mind. Don't pick up Brandon Weeden. Seriously, don't pick up Brandon Weeden unless he really starts playing well with what he has. He's usually not one of the best stars in the league. For gosh sakes, the Cowboys signed Kellen Moore and got Matt Castle from the Bills for depth. I mean, which is okay, but is one of them going to supplant Weeden? Quarterback time will tell, but for now, don't rely on Brandon Weeden as one of your quarterback options. There's better options out there for you. Or if someone's going to give up on Sam Bradford. And here's the thing about the Eagles, and we'll talk about this too. I don't think the Eagles are going to struggle for this long. At least I hope not. And same with the Colts. The Eagles and the Colts right now are two of the biggest surprises in the league in terms of disappointments right now. I don't, 0-2 teams. A lot of Seahawks are 0-2, Ravens are 0-2. A lot of shocking teams at 0-2. But I don't think they're going to be that bad for this long. Obviously, right now, based on what you've seen, you have to worry a little bit on both of those situations. But if someone gave up on Bradford, then maybe he's worth a look at as someone you can pick up. So, other injury situations to look at. Jay Cutler is going to be out at least 2 games with a hamstring issue. Jimmy Clausen comes in to start. So not a great option there. But if you own the Seahawks defense, you're chomping at the bit this week because A, you get Chicago, who's been terrible, and B, Cam Chancellor announced he is ending his holdout after 54 days of holding out. Cam Chancellor is back in the Seahawks defense, so huge win there for you Seahawks DST owners. So you're going to be hopefully getting some big points this week in that matchup. Matthew Stafford was sore after week 2 with some rib issues, but from all accounts, he is going to be good for week 3, so no concern about the Sunday night matchup there with Denver. Running backs, Carlos Hyde, we were told he kind of had a thigh issue and a potential head concussion issue, but again, all reports with him are that he is all right and will be good to go for the game for San Francisco this week against Arizona. Tevin Coleman, likely out this week, could be even more with the rib issue. So Devontae Freeman will take his spot and could really be a very good option at running back for you if he's available out there on waivers as well. Lamar Miller in Miami, ankle issue, but again, all signs pointing to him playing this week, but just monitor that if things change. But he's been very disappointing in the Miami backfield. Miami's been disappointing for most part this year in some areas. Some players doing well, others not so much. Miller not really taking up in that spot where you'd normally be an RB2 for you, so just keep that in mind. Eddie Lacy, the ankle issue that he suffered against Seattle, it's a day-to-day thing right now. Hasn't been ruled out yet, but so just monitor that if you're a Lacy owner. But if he is out, James Starks makes for a nice play as well this week. I mentioned Drew Brees. I'm a Brees owner. The shoulder thing is a concern for me. It was diagnosed as a bruised rotator cuff, so we don't know what's going to become of that. He says he's going to play week 3. I'm not so sure. There are some sites that are saying he's going to be out. There are others saying he could play. So it's kind of a mixed bag. I'm not trusting him this week, regardless of his health, because he didn't look great against Tampa Bay last week. So if you have better options, you can probably play him over Drew Brees. Devontae Adams, wide receiver of the Packers, is dealing with foot and ankle issues. Ty Montgomery filled in for him last week, but again, nothing for the Packers yet. He's been ruled out yet, but just monitor that situation and see what happens there. Eric Decker is a big one. One of the top receivers on the Jets, a knee issue, but thankfully he has avoided a major injury. He is just day-to-day right now, so monitor that situation as well. How about the Jets, 2-0? Very impressive start for the Jets. With Ryan Fitzpatrick at quarterback, the defense being strong. Very, very, very impressive start for the Jets. And then finally, another big one, tight end in Tampa Bay, Austin Seferian-Jenkins. He will be out 4 to 6 weeks with a shoulder issue. So you won't have him in your lineup. So if there's other options at tight end out there for you, you might want to look at those on waivers also. And then just in general, again, guys underproducing. I mean, guys that Jeremy Hill had a terrible week last week at running back. A guy you normally rely on for big, consistent points, and he had 2 fumbles last week, got benched in favor of Giovanni Bernard. Don't know how that's going to shake out going forward, but, Bernard might still get some work this week, but Hill still right now is the guy to own. He's still going to be the main option as long as he can take care of those fumbling issues. What to make of Amir Abdullah? I mean, in that Detroit situation, he had a great opener in the first week, and then all of a sudden came crashing back down to earth against Minnesota, had a donut, 0 points, no points in CBS leagues, killed my team last week. So really, you got to really kind of drop his stock going forward. Again, he's in the timeshare with Joy Bell, and Theo Riddick's involved, and so it's just hard to tell what we're going to get out of him going forward. What to make of the situation in Denver? Is this the last gasp for C.J. Anderson? I'm an Anderson owner, and for me, this is the last chance I'm giving him. If he doesn't perform well against Detroit on Sunday night, I think it's safe to say that I can cut ties with C.J. Anderson. And if Ronnie Hellman keeps cutting into his work, then goodbye. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. It's just frustrating to see your first-round draft pick in that situation. So very tough to watch there. Now, a timeshare that does work is in San Diego, and clearly Melvin Gordon and Danny Woodhead both putting up very good numbers there in San Diego as well. Gordon had a good week last week. I think both had 9 fantasy points last week. So tougher matchup this week with Cincinnati, though. So, both players, not great options. I prefer Gordon to Woodhead this week for the tough matchup, but both doing really well there as well. So a lot to break down, a lot to get to. Another thing I want to mention, the situation in Cleveland. We just find out today that Josh McCown is cleared from concussion protocol. He's healthy, and now he's going to start this week. This after a week where Johnny Manziel looked absolutely amazing in the win over Tennessee through 2 deep bomb, beautiful touchdown passes to Travis Benjamin, and who, by the way, is not a bad sleeper wide receiver 3 choice, by the way. And now Cleveland's going back to McCown. I don't understand why. I really don't. If they think they can win better with Josh McCown, okay, that's their call. It's their decision. Excuse me. I don't get it. I don't know why they're making that call. I would much prefer Manziel, seeing what I saw from him last week, but again, not my call. I'm just kind of confused. My mind is still confused as to to the whole move of of why they would do that. So anyway, leading off with that. But again, no matter what, bottom line, no matter what situation you're in, we're trying to get you a win, and that's what we want to do here. Again, if you're 2-0 or 1-1. Consider yourself fortunate with all the wild and wacky landscape that the NFL is right now. But for those of us who are in the 0-2 boat, we need help. So that's hopefully what we're here for. So let's break down the Week 3 matchups this week. And I do want to start, though, I haven't really mentioned DSTs much in this because I'm focusing on skill positions, but I want to look at 5 DSTs this week I think you can surely start that you can exploit. So, like, in these matchups, you want to start your players. Seattle, obviously. Any Seahawk going against Chicago? Yes, definitely. Your normal guys, Russell Wilson, Marshawn Lynch. Maybe Fred Jackson is a sleeper flex play. Doug Baldwin, I think, is a pretty decent wide receiver 3. Jimmy Graham, and Jimmy Graham, big situation regarding Jimmy Graham. Apparently, from what we have heard, he's not really happy with his role in the Seahawks offense. He's not getting thrown the ball as much. We kind of expected that because Seattle is not really much of a passing offense than New Orleans was. So, for me right now, I mean, you're still going to want to start him, but he's more, to me, of a borderline tight end 1 or 2 than a safe tight end 1 like he normally was. So, because he's just not getting as many targets as he usually is. So, but hopefully Seattle will get him the ball more in the future. Another defense, if you're into streaming defenses, Cleveland is a great option this week going up against Oakland. Even though the Raiders beat Baltimore last week, Raiders still can't stop anything. So even with Josh McCown at quarterback, I still think Cleveland's going to have opportunities. Isaiah Crowell is a sneaky RB2 play, I think, this week as well. I mentioned Benjamin as a wide receiver 3. So obviously New England going up against Jacksonville is a given. Any team facing Jacksonville, their DST is a given for a start. I mentioned the Jets, especially going up against a Philly offense that clearly appears dysfunctional right now. What an utter disaster that was for Philly last week to watch that against Dallas, and just an ugly. And then it turned out to be an ugly game because no Romo, no Bryant, and the Eagles' offense just stinking. That was really, I thought that'd be a really good game. It turned out to be a complete bust. So just did not expect that at all. But the Jets playing really well on the defensive side of the ball, and the offense with Ryan Fitzpatrick and Chris Ivory and Brandon Marshall, Eric Decker. So they're an option this week. And Carolina, if Drew Brees is out, they get Luke McCown at quarterback, and Carolina gets to beat up on him. And the Saints receiving core is just awful. It's one of the worst in the league. Yes, Brandon Cooks maybe emerged as number 1, but that might just be by default because Behind him is an aging Marcus Colston, a young guy in Brandon Coleman that's still trying to find his room. Ben Watson's their tight end. I mean, this is a very poor receiving core. Mark Ingram at running back is okay. C.J. Spiller's not healthy. This is a mess in New Orleans right now. So Carolina is going to feast on that for sure. But let's look at players in general. Top 5 this week, of course, quarterback-wise: Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Cam Newton, Eli Manning. I think it goes without saying that Tom Brady right now is the number 1 quarterback, if not the number 1 player in fantasy football. I mean, he has just taken his game to a whole nother level. Couldn't ask for a better matchup this week in Jacksonville. Great win over Buffalo last week to win that game the way that he did, putting up points out the wazoo. I mean, Tom Brady, even though Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers are usually must-starts regardless of matchup, I think Tom Brady is well ahead of them. I have him as the number 1 option for sure this week. Then Wilson, great matchup as always with Chicago, so yes, he's a must-start. And Aaron Rodgers always a must-start regardless, but definitely against Kansas City on Monday night. Cam Newton, I think, is a must-start this week against New Orleans. And Eli Manning, I think, is a very safe number 1 option against Washington. Washington's defense, not exactly all that impressive. Eli's got a lot of weapons at his disposal. I think certainly he's a very safe play this week as well. Next 5 on the list: Andrew Luck, Carson Palmer, Nick Foles, Peyton Manning, Ben Roethlisberger. I said last week that I was shocked that Andrew Luck was rated as the number 1 quarterback by CBS last week. I was very shocked at that, and I was a little bit concerned because of the fact that that the Colts offense was not playing well. Apparently, it's not a 1-week anomaly. This Colts team right now on the offensive side of the ball is very, very bad, okay? They are just really bad. The offensive line can't block for crap. The weapons, he's being pressured all the time. Frank Gore, while runs well at times, not completely fluid. Andre Johnson is right now an utter disaster. T.Y. Hilton is healthy, but he's not getting as much production. The young guys are occasionally stepping up, but not as much. Dwayne Allen can't stay on the field. He's hurt again, by the way. So it's an utter mess. Even though it's a great matchup with Tennessee this week, it's at Tennessee on the road. Mariota's going to want to impress the home crowd. I don't like that. I would much rather prefer Carson Palmer. Carson Palmer is he's playing like a must-start option. If you were able to get, here's the funny thing about Carson Palmer. Start of the season, he was on my waivers. He was not a quarterback that was even drafted. Not even drafted. What? Is the concern his health? I mean, yes, I understand that in a way, but if he's healthy, he plays like an elite-level quarterback every single week. That offense is beastly in Arizona, and he's shown it now in the first 2 weeks of the season. So if an owner was able to get Carson Palmer off waivers, good on you, because now you've got an elite option as long as he stays healthy. So I would much prefer Carson Palmer to Andrew Luck. I would much prefer Peyton Manning this week going up against Detroit to Andrew Luck. I would. I'd put them both ahead of Luck. And Ben Roethlisberger. Hello. 1, he gets Le'Veon Bell back. 2, he's making Antonio Brown look more like a weapon that he is. He's going to get Martavis Bryant back in Week 5 soon. I would much prefer. I would put Palmer, Peyton Manning, and Roethlisberger again ahead of Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck, to me, for now, the way this Colts offense is playing is barely inside the top 10 at quarterback. I'm sorry. I mean, and I'm a Colts fan, and this for me is hard, but I'm also a realist. I know and I can accept when my team stinks, okay? And right now, the Colts just stink. I mean, there's no sugarcoating about it. I mean, the Colts played absolutely terrible in losses to Buffalo and the Jets, and I understand Buffalo and the Jets are 2 good defenses. I understand that, but it doesn't excuse the fact that the Colts offense has just absolutely been disastrous in back-to-back performances. And Luck's got to take some of that blame on him. So, and you've got this whole rift with Chuck Pagano and Ryan Grigson. I mean, because apparently Pagano doesn't agree with some of the personnel decisions Grigson made. It's a mess. It's an utter mess. It's in as George Carlin, late George Carlin said, in the vicinity of dumpster fire. I mean, it really is. It's in the vicinity. They're here's like a light flame, like a candle flame over here, and then there's Inferno, and the Colts are kind of in that Inferno zone right now. Like, oh my gosh, we're on fire. They're kind of burning here, and then here is huge dumpster fire, landfill fire, whatever over here. There's this huge conflagration of fire. They're not quite there yet, but they're getting pretty close with each week. So it's pretty bad. So I would much rather, if you're in a situation where you have Palmer, Peyton Manning, or Big Ben with Andrew Luck, I would much rather play any one of those three guys over Andrew Luck this week. The only one I would not is Nick Foles. Again, the Rams offense, yes, at times has been impressive, but they looked pedestrian against Washington last week, and they really shouldn't have. And the running game's a mess, and there's not one receiver that has emerged there. When are they going to get Brian Quick back? We don't know. What's it going to look like there? We don't know. So it's just, to me, Foles is more of a QB2. I'm surprised he's rated that high. So I would rate those Palmer, Peyton Manning, Big Ben, Luck, and then Foles. That's how I'd rate those 5. The next 5, Matt Ryan, Johnny Manziel, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Matthew Stafford, Teddy Bridgewater. Now, this was before that we knew that McCown was going to be the starting quarterback. So, obviously, Johnny Manziel now is completely off this board. He's completely fallen off the map here now. I would have had him as a solid, with the matchup against Oakland, I would have had him as a solid QB1 or QB2 for sure. But now that McCown's starting instead, I really can't put McCown up that high. I don't think I'd have him in that position. I think Matt Ryan's a must start. Obviously, no one can stop Julio Jones right now. The connection they have there. He's getting Leonard Hankerson involved in the offense as well. He's going to have the weapon Devontae Freeman at running back with Coleman out. So that's huge. Dallas' secondary is, as we always know, leaky. So I love Matt Ryan. I think he's good there. Ryan Fitzpatrick of the Jets, again, I think a sneaky QB2 this week, maybe even borderline 1, because, again, Philly's a mess right now. That secondary is nothing to write home about. As they keep showing, that Maxwell guy keeps getting, I think Byron Brandon Maxwell keeps getting burned all the time. Nothing to write home about there. I like him this week as a sneaky QB2. Matthew Stafford, sneaky QB2 as well for me. Again, more of a 2 than a 1 going up against that tough Denver defense. But I can't put him above Fitzpatrick. And Teddy Bridgewater, I don't know. As hard as it was, I just got rid of Teddy Bridgewater because I right now, the Minnesota offense to me is more of they're more focused right now on getting Adrian Peterson back in the fold and getting back in the running game than they are in the passing game. Teddy Bridgewater hasn't done much with Charles Johnson or Mike Wallace. Weapons around him there. Occasionally to Kyle Rudolph, but not much. He's not utilizing his weapons through the air. So that's what's disappointing about Teddy Bridgewater right now. And tough matchup with San Diego this week. So I'm not thrilled with Teddy Bridgewater this week. Then that presents a compelling argument because then who would I put above Teddy Bridgewater? I don't even know if I put McCown above him. I think that'd be really hard to do. Again, out of that 5, I like Matt Ryan. I like Ryan Fitzpatrick. I like those 2 the most out of that bunch. Then I would say Stafford. I probably would put Joe Flacco above Teddy Bridgewater, only barely. It is also a tough matchup there with Cincinnati, but Flacco tends to play well against his divisional opponents for some reason. I've noticed that. So, and it's at home. So I actually prefer Flacco to Bridgewater. I would prefer Tyrod Taylor and Marcus Mariota to Bridgewater. I would. I would move them up. I'm very high on both these guys. I'm high on Tyrod Taylor. Who would have thought that Buffalo came up with a quarterback? I mean, really. But Tyrod Taylor has emerged as a solid weapon in that Buffalo offense with his passing and running ability. I like him as a very solid QB2 against Miami this week. And, of course, I'm not just because I have him on my team, but because I think he's going to, again, make the Colts defense look like fools because the Colts defense is also banged up in the secondary. You realize that all 4 starting members of the secondary were injured for the Colts last week? Just put that in your mind. Just put that in perspective in your head. That's how bad it was. Marcus Mariota, if he can put up 4 touchdowns on Tampa Bay, imagine what he can do against a banged-up Colts defense at home. I think Mariota is a very sneaky QB 1 or 2. I would put Flacco, Taylor, and Mariota all ahead of Teddy Bridgewater. I'm just not fond of the Vikings offense right now and what they're doing. You know, they don't throw the ball enough right now. They don't. They're focusing on Adrian Peterson, and we all thought, oh, breakout year, Bridgewater, sophomore, 3rd-year campaign, breakout year, woo! You got Charles Johnson, he's breaking out now, yeah, and where's that right now? It's nowhere. Charles Johnson has had 2 weeks in single digits. You go off my team. So yeah, Matt Ryan, safe. Fitzpatrick, I think, is sneaky. QB2, Stafford, yes. But I would even put Flacco, Taylor, and Mariota ahead of Teddy Bridgewater. Alex Smith, to me, against Green Bay, that's a tough matchup. That's more of a QB2 or 3 if you're desperate. It's going to be very tough for Kansas City to beat Green Bay in Green Bay on Monday night. Then the next 5 after that, then we get into the running backs. We're talking Marshawn Lynch, Le'Veon Bell, Brandon Weeden, Colin Kaepernick, Ryan Tannehill. Obviously, for me, Marshawn Lynch, Le'Veon Bell must-start guys. And it's so great for people who have held on to Le'Veon Bell for these 2 weeks that he was suspended for the first 2 games of the year. If you still drafted him early in your fantasy draft and you were able to survive the first 2 weeks with the running backs you had they had to draft behind him, if you survived that, good for you. And now you get Le'Veon Bell back, and he's your RB1 right away. So great to see that. He's a must-start, regardless pretty much of matchup. And he should do well against St. Louis this week. So definitely must start for Le'Veon Bell and Marshawn Lynch, obviously, a match, especially though going up against that non-existent Chicago defense. But then out of Weeden, Kaepernick, and Tannehill, I got to say I like Kaepernick the most. And I know, again, the matchup is tough at Arizona. But I think the potential is there for him to at least put up decent QB 2-3 numbers. Again, Kaepernick with that running ability and the weapons he's got around him. With Hyde's going to play. Reggie Bush status still kind of in doubt, but in all likelihood may not play again. So he's got Anquan Bolden, got Torrey Smith. So the potential is there, and I think they'll have some opportunities. If they're down big, there'll be garbage time opportunities. So again, a look as a QB 2 or 3. Same with Tannehill. Tough matchup going to, they're playing at home against Buffalo, but still a tough matchup with that Buffalo defense being as strong as it is. I don't know what to make of Miami's offense right now. I thought they were going to have, again, kind of like Minnesota, I thought they were going to have a breakout performance on offense. It really hasn't shown itself yet. So losing to Jacksonville last week, that was just a big head scratcher. There were a lot of upsets last week when you really think about it. So that was kind of, but like I said, Brandon Weeden I wouldn't touch right now because I prefer Kaepernick and Tannehill ahead of Brandon Weeden. Brandon Weeden is really the lowest on the quarterback totem pole. He really hasn't really proven himself as a starter. And again, going up against Atlanta, that Atlanta defense is so much tougher this year than it is in past years. They're not a walkover defense anymore. Not fond of the matchup. Phillip Rivers, I prefer Phillip Rivers to Brandon Weeden too because, to me, his normal QB2 status going up against Minnesota on the road, that is a tough matchup. A little tougher defense. Minnesota, as I mentioned, just shut down Detroit last week a little bit, except for Calvin Johnson, but more of a QB2. So I'd much prefer him to Brandon Weeden as well. Next 5, Jamal Charles, Andy Dalton, Blake Bortles, Luke McCown, Ryan Mallett. Jamal Charles is a must-start regardless of matchup. I don't care if he's going to Green Bay. I understand it's a tough matchup there, but you can't afford to sit Jamal Charles. You're starting him in any matchup regardless. Again, I mentioned I like Andy Dalton. If you're in a quarterback dilemma, if you're a Romo owner, if you're a Breeze owner like myself, if you're concerned about Cutler, if you're a Cutler owner and you don't have him for 2 weeks, and if he's out there on waivers, Andy Dalton is someone I think you can pick up and plug in right away. The matchup, Baltimore's defense, not the same as it once was, even though it's on the road. I think, Dalton is, again, making, connections with A.J. Green as always. Tyler Eifert, getting him involved as a key weapon. with Gio Bernard playing as well as he did last week because of a third option for you. So I like Andy Dalton really as a sneaky QB1 or 2. I think that he can definitely be taken advantage of if you're struggling at quarterback right now. I think he's cutting down the turnovers, not as much in that department, so he's playing a lot better. But I would definitely not touch Blake Bortles, Luke McCown, or Ryan Mallett. Not only because I don't think they're going to put consistent fantasy points, but you're not going to rely on these matchups. You're not going to play Bortles against New England at New England. You're not going to play McCown at Carolina, and Houston. Even though Tampa's defense is nothing to write home about, with Ryan Mallett, you're going to want to trust that as a quarterback option. Not even maybe Mallett's probably the best out of that group in deep maybe 3 quarterback leagues, but only a long flyer if that. But I would not trust Bortles or McCown. After that, it's Odell Beckham, Eddie Lacy, Adrian Peterson, Antonio Brown, Sam Bradford. 4 of those guys are must-start guys, and regardless. Odell Beckham should have a big week this week against Washington. Top option there for the Giants. I mean, the Giants are another shocking 0-2 team. They're a big surprise. The Giants have only lost those first 2 games with 5 points combined? And the reason is they're beating themselves. They have terrible clock management. They lost the game to Dallas with the whole thing, not scoring and giving them time to score, and then Atlanta this week, and they had the time flub up, and it's just head scratching. But I think the Giants need to find a way to turn this around. I think they will, but it's just gonna take some time. But for fantasy purposes, Odell Beckham, you want to start him as normal this week. Eddie Lacy, as long as he plays, as long as the ankle is not that big an issue, as long as he's healthy, he's a must start against Kansas City. AP, of course, I mentioned Minnesota loving that running game, getting him back in the fold. He's a must start against San Diego. And Antonio Brown, no one can stop Antonio Brown right now. The opponent I had last week killed me with Tom Brady, Julian Edelman, and Antonio Brown last week. Completely dominated my team. So no one can cover him or Julio Jones. Right now, top 2 receivers in the NFL are Antonio Brown and Julio Jones, hands down. So if you're going up against someone with Antonio Brown or Julio Jones, unless you got a really good roster, you're probably losing. Just saying. So yeah, those 4 guys are must starts. I would not trust Sam Bradford. Again, Eagles offense is a mess. Jets defense, really good. On the road, you're going to the Jets. I would not rely on Sam Bradford this week. I know a lot of people usually rely on him as a QB2 or something to that effect, but unless the Eagles find a way to clean up their offensive concerns, not a good option right now. Next 5, Jameis Winston, Arian Foster, Julio Jones, Jimmy Clausen, Rob Gronkowski. Again, 2 of those guys out of that group are must-start guys. I mentioned Julio Jones. You're starting against Dallas. Again, no one can stop him. Leaky secondary. He's clearly Matt Ryan's favorite target. You're starting him right now. Same with Gronk. Again, any Patriot this week that you would normally rely on, you're starting against Jacksonville. That's Brady. That's Edelman. That's Gronk. Who am I missing? The kicker, Gostkowski, the Patriots defense. You might even get away with starting Dion Lewis. And I know with Belichick and running backs, it's not exactly clear-cut. Belichick doesn't like fantasy football. We know that. We don't know what's going to happen to the running backs. But Dion Lewis actually out-touched LeGarrette Blount last week in LeGarrette Blount's first game back from suspension. So maybe Dion Lewis is taking this job and running with it literally. But we've fallen for that in the past with Jonas Gray and Chamberlain and shall I go on? Yeah, so it's tough. It's tough in that situation, but maybe as a flex play, you can get away with Dion Lewis. But any other pitcher you normally start, you start him this week. Jameis to me is more of a QB3 this week. I'm not thrilled with the matchup, obviously, going against Houston, at Houston, with J.J. Watt there and Cushing there in Houston, and it's tough. And when Clowney's going to come back, it's a tough matchup. But if he can go into New Orleans and beat the Saints, then who knows what he's capable of. So, and he's got his receivers back healthy, except for Safarian Jenkins, who's going to be out, so that'll affect him a little bit. But it will get Mike Evans back into the fold, hopefully. So if you got Mike Evans and Vincent Jackson, that might work out for you, and Doug Martin. So, but for now, more of a QB3. I wouldn't touch Jimmy Clausen, not against Seattle. No. You should know better than that. Don't even think about it. Don't even think about adding Jimmy Clausen. No. Arian Foster, there have been mixed reports on Arian Foster's health. When is he actually going to come back from this offseason groin surgery? When is it going to happen? I've been reading, I think I read a tweet from Adam Schefter today that said the Texans are not expecting Foster to play this week. There are some saying that he might come back this week. Some are targeting week 4. So here's the thing. If Arian Foster is a no-go this week, then obviously you keep him on your bench. Don't play him. Don't do that. The Texans' running game, though, has been awful in Foster's absence. Alfred Blue has not really taken this starting job and really carried himself, so he's been kind of just disappointing. But Houston's offense, let alone, is disappointing. So, but if Foster comes back, obviously he's going to be put back in your lineups as a solid RB1 or 2. So, but if he doesn't play this week, then just keep him on your bench. Next 5, Latavius Murray, Demaryius Thomas, Derek Carr, Randall Cobb, Kirk Cousins. I got to say, obviously, again, 2 of those guys are must-starts. Demaryius Thomas, Randall Cobb. Regardless of matchup, you normally start those guys. But I got to say, I like the Raiders this week. And I never thought I'd say that. But that you think about it. The Cleveland-Oakland matchup this week could put up a lot of fantasy points, if you really think about it. I was not expecting the Baltimore-Oakland matchup that last week to put that many points in the game. Oakland won that game. Another one of the upsets. Oakland won that game 37-33. I was not expecting that last week. I was not expecting Oakland, of all teams, to play that well. But Derek Carr played and looked really good. Amari Cooper looked the part of potentially best rookie this year in this class, especially certainly the best rookie wide receiver. Latavius Murray, the running back, is still doing great things there. I got to say, Oakland's going to be competitive in games. They might not have a winning record at the end of the year, or they'll surprise and maybe they will, but at least maybe 8-8. But I got to say, Oakland's going to contend this year. Oakland is no longer the pushover that they always were. Now, their defense still sucks, but offensively, they're going to compete in games. When did we ever think we would say that Oakland's offense right now looks better than Indianapolis? Yeah, okay. I will probably here. Hang on. I will probably. Okay, hang on. This is okay. Just for the record. Okay. Okay. Oakland's offense is better than Indy 2015. There. If you ever see this on anyone else's video ever again in the future or past, we'll flash back to this moment, okay? Because this is tough to write right now. This is tough to say that Oakland put up 37 points last week, and Indianapolis only put up 7. That is crazy. That is crazy. Cray right here. Absolutely cray. But you know what? It's true. It's true. I don't like it. Wow, and it's so bad it bounced out of my trash can. There. I hate saying that, but it's the truth. If you're in a pinch at quarterback or running back, I tell you what, Derek Carr, solid QB2 this week. Latavius Murray, solid RB2 this week. Great matchup. But as for Kirk Cousins, no, I would not start him at the Giants. I would not touch Kirk Cousins. Next 5 on this list: DeAndre Hopkins, Larry Fitzgerald, Chris Ivory, Carlos Hyde, Julian Edelman. Again, to me, Julian Edelman's the best of that bunch. I'm surprised he's rated as low as all those guys. You need to move Julian Edelman up your wide receiver list because he's a must-start. He clearly is a must-start option. I put Julian Edelman above all 4 of those guys because, to me, he's a must-start. Great matchup. He's clearly Tom Brady's #1 weapon outside of Gronk. Must-start option for me this week. I would put Larry Fitzgerald, though, ahead of DeAndre Hopkins. Larry Fitzgerald caught 3, count them, 3 of the 4 Carson Palmer touchdown passes last week against Chicago. Is he back? You want to say he is. You want to say he's the focal point of the offense again. And if he is, great. Clearly, he has a great rapport with Carson Palmer. We've seen that. Michael Floyd is clearly the non-existent option right now in this offense. John Brown is getting involved. But so if that's the case, then we need to trust Larry Fitzgerald going forward. So I know it might sound a little far-fetched, but I have Larry Fitzgerald as a wide receiver, borderline 1, low 2 this week against San Francisco. If he keeps putting up those kind of numbers, if Carson Palmer keeps playing as well as he is, then Larry Fitz, L. Fitz, is going to have big weeks ahead. So I would put him second in that group, right below Edelman. I have Hopkins as more of a wide receiver 2. Someone's got to catch the ball in Houston. Clearly, he's the top option there. And Tampa's defense, nothing to write home about. So I have him as more of a wide receiver 2. Again, I love Chris Ivory, though. Chris Ivory, underrated running back. Again, if you're able to get this guy off waivers or draft him, good on you, because you're getting really good production from Chris Ivory in the Jets' backfield. And again, going up against the Eagles this week, sneaky RB1 or 2 play. I really like Chris Ivory this week. Has been impressive so far every single game this year. And Carlos Hyde, again, lucky that Carlos Hyde did not suffer significant injury this week. All signs are him pointing to play, although it is a tougher matchup going to Arizona. So for me, more of a low-end RB2 this week. Not like a must-starting option, but at least someone that can be usable, but temper your expectations because of the tough matchup in Arizona. Next 5 on the list: TJ Yeldon, Emmanuel Sanders, Matt Forte, Dion Lewis, Brandon Marshall. I like Matt Forte the most out of that group. What's Chicago going to do? Let Jimmy Clausen throw? Yeah, exactly. It's going to be the Matt Forte show. Even though the tough matchup in Seattle, and normally and I've done in the past that with Matt Forte, I have not, in bad matchups, I don't think his production is going to be, I've poo-pooed his production. It's not going to be any good. But in this situation, the Bears cannot try to win this game with Jimmy Clausen throwing. They can't. They're going to have to put the rock in Matt Forte's hands, and they're going to have to try to beat the Seahawks defense on the ground. So out of those guys, I like Forte the most. Emmanuel Sanders to me is also a must start. Again, top option in Denver, Sunday night game. You're going to need the points. So I like him this week. Out of those other 3 guys with Dion Lewis, Brandon Marshall, and TJ Yeldon, I mentioned Dion Lewis briefly. Again, to me, more of an RB3 or a flex. I think a really sneaky flex play. Again, if you're in need of if you play in a league where you use a flex player, I think Dion Lewis could certainly be usable in that position. Again, considering the good matchup. So I'm going to rate him 3rd out of that group. Brandon Marshall, again, I think, potentially if Decker doesn't play, then it's more targets for Brandon Marshall. So I really like Brandon Marshall as a wide receiver 2 or 3 this week as well. And again, I can't like TJ Yeldon. I'm sorry. I don't see the production there. It's Jacksonville. You're going at New England. Tough matchup. Belichick's going to prepare for it well. To me, more of an RB2 or 3 this week. I'm not thrilled with his matchup or Yeldon in general. Next 5, Amir Abdullah, Calvin Johnson, DeMarco Murray, Todd Gurley, T.Y. Hilton. There's really only one must-start option out of this group, and that's Megatron. Megatron came through in a huge way last week. Calvin Johnson, far and away the top option for Matthew Stafford. Hopefully can keep that production going up against Denver, even though a tough matchup there. That Detroit-Denver game might be a knockdown, drag-out, either defensive. It's either going to be a defensive struggle or a shootout. So we'll just have to see what happens, but you can't afford to bench Calvin Johnson. I own him. I'm not. So I'm playing Calvin Johnson. T.Y. Hilton, again, the Colts offense, you got to really temper expectations again with the way they've played of late. But you probably can't afford to bench T.Y. Hilton either. You're expecting top production from him. He may not get it every single week, but you're expecting that production from him. So for me, he's more of a wide receiver 2 this week than normal, just because, again, the lack of production, on the road at Tennessee. But then those other 3 guys, Amir Abdullah, DeMarco Murray, Todd Gurley. It's hard to trust any of those 3 right now. It's very hard to trust any. If you're wanting one that's probably the safest bet, it's probably Amir Abdullah. But, again, But again, it's like there was a high-speed chaser outside my house. I hear a guy gunning it and then a police car. That's pretty scary. But quick, someone turn on the scanner now. But I don't have one. But Amir Abdullah is not running like that right now, by the way. The donut last week, tough to see. For me, more of an RB3 or a flex. I do like him more than DeMarco Murray because, again, the Eagles struggles, plus the tough matchup with the Jets. Murray, to me, is more of an RB3 this week. Definitely turning in the wrong direction. And the Rams situation with running back, until one player truly emerges as the starting option, it looks like it's going to be a committee with Benny Cunningham and Todd Gurley and Trey Mason. It's a mess. It's clearly a committee that's not, so until one back emerges in St. Louis, I wouldn't touch any Rams running back. So out of that group, Megatron, Hilton, probably guys you can't afford to sit, and then Abdullah, Murray, Gurley. Next 5, Terrence Williams, Lamar Miller, Jeremy Hill, Doug Baldwin, C.J. Anderson. I think there's only one safe bet out of that bunch, and that's Terrence Williams. And even though Romo's not going to play at quarterback again, Brandon Whedon's got to throw the ball to somebody. And Terrence Williams has the best chance of any of those Dallas receivers to make catches, get a touchdown. So for me, maybe more of a wide receiver 2, but certainly, at least a safe wide receiver 2 for you this week. So Terrence Williams, I think, is the best out of that bunch. I like Doug Baldwin this week as more of a wide receiver 3, certainly someone that's on the rise. He did have a touchdown last week for Seattle. And again, the Seattle receivers aren't going to make a whole lot of plays because, Russell Wilson doesn't throw the ball that much. But you're going up against Chicago. The defense is porous. It's a matchup worth exploiting. So if you're hurting at wide receiver, or if you have Doug Baldwin and you haven't played him all year, maybe this is the week you can plug him in as a wide receiver 3. But what to make of those running backs? What to make of Lamar Miller, Jeremy Hill, and C.J. Anderson? I really hope, again, that this is the week that C.J. Anderson gets it going. I've had him on my team. He's my first-round draft pick. I didn't think Ronnie Hillman would get this involved in the workload in the backfield, but clearly he is. And I thought that he would, emerge from the pack. But clearly he hasn't. He's struggled the first 2 weeks of the year. If he can't get it done against Detroit, I may have to consider cutting ties with C.J. Anderson. So for now, I'm still treating him like an RB2, but the line is getting very paper thin. He's literally walking on a cliff of thin ice. And I know last week I tried to shove the invisible Ronnie Hillman off the screen, but I tell you what, it seems more and more like he's trying to creep back onto the screen. And now it's almost like he's trying to, push C.J. Anderson off his own cliff. So if Anderson can outperform this week and Hillman continues to cut into that workload, then it does concern me a little bit. So for now, more of an RB2. But Lamar Miller and Jeremy Hill, not elite options at the moment. Both have had, Miller now is banged up a little bit. Hill with the fumbling issues, getting overshadowed by Gio Bernard. If it were me, I would still prefer Hill to Miller because, again, the tougher matchup this week. Miller has to play Buffalo, and that's not going to be easy. So I have him as more of an RB3. I still like Jeremy Hill as more of an RB2 or 3 as well, but just temper expectations is all I'm saying. If Gio Bernard is out there in your league, if you're a Jeremy Hill owner and you have room on your bench, pick up Giovanni Bernard just for security, just for the remote chance that he, can get more touches. So, but just keep that in mind. Next 5, A.J. Green, Mike Evans, Travis Kelce, Melvin Gordon, Jonathan Stewart. A.J. Green and Kelce are must-start options regardless. They're going to put up their usual numbers hopefully this week, hopefully, Green I'm not so worried about. Kelce maybe going to Green Bay, but he's an elite tight end. You should still do well. Mike Evans, wide receiver 2, solid for me with Safarian Jenkins out. He's going to be the benefactor of more targets. And I'm hoping Melvin Gordon and Jonathan Stewart, from what we're seeing in recent weeks, the arrow keeps trending up. And they have decent matchups this week. Melvin Gordon had a good week last week, finally, after his not-so-good week 1. Put up decent numbers last week. I have him as an RB2 this week. I'm starting him in my league. Hopefully comes through this week as well. And Jonathan Stewart, same with him. Saints defense, excuse me, nothing to write home about. I think Jonathan Stewart's a good RB2 play as well. Devontae Freeman, Joseph Randle, Chris Johnson, Jimmy Graham, Trey Mason. Want to address something about Chris Johnson. I got a question on here last week about the situation in Arizona's running back between Chris Johnson and David Johnson, between their situation while Andre Ellington is out. I said that I liked Chris Johnson as an RB2 as long as Ellington was out, and Johnson is more of an RB3 or a flex play. But I would not be surprised if Johnson got more touches. Well, as in David Johnson. Well, David Johnson seems to be doing more with less. Chris Johnson is still getting good yardage, don't get me wrong. But David Johnson is doing more with less. He's scoring touchdowns, something that Chris Johnson is not doing. So here's the thing. Ellington is tentatively expected to hopefully come back next week. He's starting to run again. So what do you make of the situation in Arizona right now? I would say if it were me to choose between the two, I would slightly prefer David Johnson to Chris Johnson because of the touchdown factor. So, but for me, in reality, I think both are more or less RB3 or flex plays. I like David Johnson as a really good flex play. I like Chris Johnson better in standard leagues that don't use the flex. But if you're looking for a flex play, I love David Johnson. And I think, because again, he has that potential to rip off those big, long touchdown runs with that speed. So I really like David Johnson. But Chris Johnson, for me, is more of an RB3 or a flex. I like Joseph Randle, actually, as a sleeper RB3. And here's why. Because, again, with Whedon at quarterback, I don't think Dallas is going to throw very much. I think they're going to rely on Randle a lot more to run the football. I know there's a committee there in Dallas with him, McFadden, and Dunbar, and yada, yada, yada. But Randle is going to get the most carries out of the bunch, and hopefully he can, do something with it. But I agree with the fact that Devontae Freeman is probably the best option out of that bunch because, again, he's going to have the starting job while Tevin Coleman is out. Really, really sneaky RB2 considering the matchup against Dallas. So I like Devontae Freeman as a starting option. Joseph Randle is a sleeper. Chris Johnson is more of a flex play. Jimmy Graham, again, I mentioned it, more of a tight end 2, but very much borderline 1. If you can't afford to sit Jimmy Graham, then don't sit him. And again, St. Louis, avoid that situation at all costs. Next 5, Rashad Jennings, Jordan Matthews, Fred Jackson, James Jones, Michael Floyd. I like Rashad Jennings this week. I like him as an RB2. Great matchup with Washington. Giants should hopefully do well again this week, and I like him there. Not too thrilled with the other guys in that bunch, especially, again, Michael Floyd not getting a lot of targets in that Arizona offense, unfortunately. More of a wide receiver 3 who's trending in the wrong direction. James Jones is as solid as wide receiver 3 as you'll get. He's clearly getting targets in that Packer offense. I like him this week as well. And again, Jordan Matthews, with the Eagles, you got to drop him down a little bit because of the fact they're struggling, but still usable right now as a wide receiver 2. Amari Cooper, Golden Tate, David Johnson, Alfred Morris, Frank Gore. I mentioned David Johnson. You know how I feel about him. Amari Cooper, solid wide receiver 2 or 3 again. Start your Raiders. I never thought I'd say that again, but start your Raiders. The matchup's good. They're playing well. Amari Cooper looked the part last week, so I think you can use him this week as a wide receiver 2 or 3. Not thrilled with Alfred Morris. He's clearly now in a timeshare with Matt Jones. Clearly. There's no denying that Matt Jones looked amazing last week. If he's in waivers, get him in your league. I got him off waivers this week. I'm excited about that to see if Matt Jones isn't a fluke. But clearly Alfred Morris is on the downswing, and of course, as is Frank Gore. Still usable, though, as an RB2 or 3. But again, you got to really put a whole down arrow on the Colts offense right now because it's not producing. Roddy White, John Brown, Justin Forsett, Keenan Allen, Mark Ingram. Again, I think Brown and Allen are the safest out of that bunch. I think both those guys are usable in their matchups this week, as is Mark Ingram. Again, the Saints aren't going to be asked to throw much if Breeze doesn't play, so I like Ingram as a solid RB2. Roddy White and Justin Forsett. Roddy White was catchless last week. That has to concern me a little bit going forward. Has he been leapfrogged by Leonard Hankerson? That's a little concerning. So he's definitely trending downward for me. More of a wide receiver 3 this week. Forsett, more of an RB2. You can still use him, but it's a tough matchup with Cincinnati. So I think it's going to be more of a Flacco show in that game. So just tough for me to trust Justin Forsett to get reliable numbers. Devontae Adams, Gio Bernard, Mike Wallace, Brandon Cooks, LaShawn McCoy. Again, if you need another flex play, again, I mentioned picking up Giovanni Bernard if he's out there. Likely not out there, but if he is, worth a shot to grab as a flex play. As long as Devontae Adams is healthy, I think he's at least a decent wide receiver 3 or 4. LaShawn McCoy, yes, it's a tough matchup at Miami, but you probably can't afford to sit him. To me, I think a solid RB2. Not thrilled with Mike Wallace or Brandon Cooks right now. Vikings, Saints passing offense right now, non-existent. Travis Benjamin, Alshon Jeffrey, Jeremy Maclin, Vincent Jackson, Doug Martin. I mentioned Travis Benjamin. Now, to me, if Manziel were still starting, I would have had Travis Benjamin as probably a sneaky wide receiver 3. But now that they're going back to McCown, I don't even think Benjamin's worth playing. McCown clearly, wasn't exactly a big-time passing threat. He was more of a handoff to Isaiah Crowell or Duke Johnson and run the ball. I really didn't have him connected with any receivers as much as Manziel threw the deep passes. So I really can't rely on Benjamin. So he really falls back to more wide receiver 4 status for me. He would have been much higher if were Manziel were the quarterback. But I think Jeremy Maclin is a safe play as a wide receiver 3. He's going to get targets from Alex Smith. I mentioned the Bucks. Vincent Jackson, Doug Martin. Vincent Jackson, I think, is at least a solid wide receiver 2-3 this week. Jameis Winston's going to find him the ball, and him and Mike Evans both. And Doug Martin, at least a decent running back 2 or 3 if you're desperate. I think certainly that the potential is there for him to get touches. You probably can't afford to sit Alshon Jeffrey if he's healthy. As long as he's healthy, he'll probably be a decent wide receiver 2. But again, temper your expectations because, again, it's Jimmy Clausen, not Jay Cutler, throwing him the ball. And, oh, by the way, he's going up against the Seattle secondary. Not exactly an ideal situation there. Other guys you might want to look at this week, Tyler Eifert. I'm surprised he's projected as low as he is, only projected for like 7 points. He's had double digits in his first 2 weeks. I love the fact that I got Tyler Eifert off of waivers. So he's probably not out there in your league now, but I love having Tyler Eifert on my team. I think he's a must start going forward. Stevie Johnson in San Diego, I like him as a wide receiver 3 this week. I mentioned Leonard Hankerson, wide receiver 3 or 4. Crockett Gilmore, how about a tight end? If you want a sleeper tight end, you look no further than Crockett Gilmore of the Ravens. Broke out last week, had a big game. Again, tough matchup with Cincinnati, but at least I think in 2 tight end leagues, if there's such a thing, usable as a tight end too, or just need a sleeper tight end, I think he's definitely worth using. I mentioned the name Matt Jones. To me right now, more of an RB4 or a flex. Let's see if it's not a 1-week wonder fluke thing. But for now, if you want to have space on your roster, get Matt Jones now while you still can. Steve Smith. I got Steve Smith off of waivers. I can't believe Steve Smith was available in my league in waivers in Baltimore. Are you kidding? He's the top option for Joe Flacco. He is the top wide receiver there right now. And besides Gilmore, is a nice second option. Steve Smith is the top guy there. And he was on my league in waivers. I couldn't believe that. I'm like, what? I'm getting him now. I mean, I needed a new third wide receiver. Boom, I got Steve Smith. So, to me, solid wide receiver 3. Heath Miller, always usable as a tight end 2 as well. How about Bishop Sankey? Again, Tennessee's offense sort of looking decent this year. Colts defense hasn't really stopped anyone in the running game. So, Bishop Sankey could be usable, I think, as an RB2 or a flex this week. I really think that's intriguing. And my only other note here, Marcus Wheaton of Pittsburgh, could be used as a wide receiver 3 this week if you're rewarded for deep catches, deep balls, PPR. Then Marcus Wheaton could be one that you could use this week as well. Okay, I mentioned the defenses, mentioned the injuries. All right, guys, that is it. That's all that I have got this week for week number 3. I hope you guys have a really a successful week this week. I hope we can. Hope it's not a too wild a week. We've had enough wildness and craziness with injuries and low production. We need to have a normal week this week. And I know usually fantasy testing is normal, but what are you gonna say? But bottom line, good luck this week. I really hope I get my first win. Hopefully, you guys, if you're sitting 0-2, get your first wins this week. As always, though, no matter what situation you are in, if you have any lineup dilemmas at all, if you have any thoughts on any players, please feel free to hit up the comment box below and share your thoughts, share your questions. As always, I check my Gmail every single day leading up to the games, so please don't hesitate to do that. And or also on the channel, you can also share thoughts there as well on the discussion page. And don't forget, of course, I always tweet any fantasy breaking news on Twitter at Fearsonator, so follow me there as well. Thank you guys so much for watching and all the support. I do this for you. That's the reason I do this. Not only that, I love the game, and you guys know that from me doing this for so long. So thank you so much. Don't forget to tune in next week when we do this all again for the Week 4 preview edition of the Fantasy Football Stock Report for your team, your league, your game, your home. Thank you guys, and good luck.